And so, despite its potential, Kenya grapples with food security issues influenced by factors such as unpredictable weather patterns, climate change, and land degradation. These challenges affect crop yields and livestock production, occasionally resulting in food shortages. Actually, it is not occasional. It has been happening for very many years, that because of challenges of environmental degradation, challenges of climate change, our food security situation has been compromised, in spite of the huge government efforts and support from development partners to turn around the sector. Both governmental tiers have launched various initiatives to boost food security. Together, we shall contemplate these transformative programs and explore fresh ideas to fortify our food systems. Yes, the national government, the county governments have done the best that they could with the support of development partners. Development partners have given a shot in the arm to both governments in trying to see that we can be able to develop good systems, food systems in the country. We are joined by our distinguished session speaker, Professor Jean Jackie Muhinda, Head of East Africa Region, AGRA. I warmly welcome our guest speaker to enlighten us with a 10-minute reflection on strong food systems for food security and inclusive growth. Let me take this opportunity to welcome JJ. JJ, karibu sana.
Asante sana, Governor.
Welcome, welcome.
Asante. Thank you very much, Your Excellency Governor, for this opportunity for me to address this audience this afternoon. Honorable Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock Development in Kenya, Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Governor, yourself, sir, Your Excellencies, Governors present, government officials, development partners in the room, distinguished representative of the private sector, and non-state actors representative, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellencies, first and foremost, allow me to convey greetings from AGRA's President, Dr. Agnes Kalibata, and the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General on Food Systems, who was supposed to be with us today and deliver this keynote address, which she has actually asked me to do on her behalf. Let me start by saying that it's a great pleasure for us to join you this afternoon to deliberate together and review together the progress that has been made during the last 10 years of the devolution, and also reflect on how we can build together strong food systems for food security, but also for an inclusive growth. As the Governor rightly said a few minutes ago, Kenya is definitely a land of massive opportunities, possessing abundant natural resources and great potential for scaling up agricultural production and the transformation of its food systems, not only for Kenya, but also for the whole of East African region. This is a country that has a young population, a well-educated population. About 35% of its 15+ population are actually below the age of 35. You know, in the agricultural sector, we see this as an opportunity, not as a challenge. And it is an important hub for agri-food technology startups, as we all know. So it also has a wealth of national, international research institution and other development organizations, mainly sitting in Nairobi, which can also play an important role in supporting the government agenda of transforming its agri-food sector. Ladies and gentlemen, that the agricultural sector in Kenya continues to be the key and a key economic and social driver of the development. The economy of Kenya is primarily dependent on agriculture, like many other countries in East Africa and in Africa broadly, with about 8% of the total Kenyan population living in rural areas, and majority of them doing farming as a sources of livelihood. I wish to salute here at this occasion the leadership of this country over the years of prioritizing agriculture and for playing a leading role actually in food systems transformation. We know that through our regular engagement with different government ministries. So despite the effort being deployed towards advancing agricultural and agri-food systems generally in the country, there is a big challenge of climate change. And this remains the greatest constraint for the agri-sector development in Kenya and our continent broadly. It's actually, Africa currently is being defined as a ground zero for the fight to mitigate against climate change. We have new studies and evidence coming up showing that a total of African population that are exposed to at least one form of climate change hazard by 2050 is going to be closer to 1 billion, which is literally 50% of the population if we continue business as usual. And this is something to be worried about. We also have recent studies this year showing that agricultural productivity growth, like the governor has just said, has actually been impacted by climate change and reduced by almost 34% for the last 50 years. So this is a very critical challenge ahead of us. But to date, Kenya stands in the forefront of finding solution. We're also encouraged by the fact that His Excellency William Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya, is leading on the Committee of African Head of States and the Government on Climate Change, and will be hosting next month the African Climate Week Summit, and AGRA, we are contributing to making that summit a success. Your Excellencies, allow me to also recognize the fact that the government of Kenya has placed agricultural sector at the core of the country's transformation agenda as indeed one of the key national priorities. The agricultural sector transformation and growth, a strategy which we supported a few years back, and the Kenya Kwanza bottom-up economic transformation agenda approach provides the framework for countries' response to making food available, but also including disadvantaged communities to participate in the economic development of this country. I note that these guiding blueprints place the smallholder farmers at the center of the government's agricultural agenda, which all of us are working towards achieving. My institution, AGRA, that I'm representing here today is an African-led and an African-based institution, and we fully share and align with the government priorities in all the countries we work with across the continent. We do not have our own agenda, but our own agenda is to make sure that we help the national government, our own government, succeed in their plans. During this conference here, as we look at the past, but also present and the future, we are all aware that there is a huge changes in the environment over the last couple of years. We had COVID-19 a few years ago, food and fertilizer crisis, recent ones, finance crisis, climate change, and so on and so forth. Just to probably emphasize on the fertilizer issues which we have been working on, probably some of you in this conference know that African countries are actually importing 90% of the fertilizers from foreign countries. And these are costing annually about 5 billion USD of fertilizer importation on the top of a 50 billion food import annually. And when we do the analysis, we realize that fertilizers are actually landing in our countries with costs that are 4 times higher than what they cost actually in Europe. So this is just an illustration to show the magnitude of the problem. So there's also a growing population, as I said earlier on, and unempowered women and youth, a fragile food ecosystem, and high poverty levels across the continent. So these challenges not only face Kenya, but also the African continent as a whole. For instance, scientific projections today show that by 2050, the African population will double to 2.4 billion almost. The next question here is, which food systems do we want to see by that time period? And if we have to feed that population, we need to start working hard today. Let me take my second and probably last part of my statement by making some proposals and point out key few actions which, if taken into account, can actually help transforming the food systems in Kenya. Number one, let me mention about the digital technologies. We all know that digital technologies have significant potential to improve efficiency, equity, and environmental sustainability in the food system. We have seen that. A range of digital technologies are already leading to better informed and engaged consumers and producers, smarter farms, and even improved public services. Increasing adoption of these technologies will actually require addressing the supply side factors such as rural network coverage and also availability of digital application. And also on the demand side factors, including skills, knowledge, trust, affordability, and even complementarity investments. The second action and the proposal we're putting forward to this meeting is on the private sector investment. We know that current levels of investment in agricultural value chain are insufficient across the board to achieve the key development goals, including ending poverty and hunger, but also boosting shared prosperity through more and better jobs, but also better stewardship, the world's natural resources by 2030, which is the SDGs horizon. Even looking at our own CADAP and Malabo declaration commitment that was signed by our head of state a few years ago, 2014, the majority of our countries are actually off track, and yet we only remained by 2 years to the 2025 horizon for the CADAP commitment. So crowding in private sector investment to help achieve these goals and optimize the use of scarce public resources will be definitely needed. The third proposal we are putting forward for you to reflect on is on creating work opportunities for youth and women in the agri-food sector. Over the next 15 years, about 1.6 billion people will reach the working age from now in low and middle income countries, including most of the African countries. Where will they be working back then, by then? What will they earn? And as I already mentioned before, the recent statistic by KNBS show that 35.7 million Kenyans, which is almost 75%, are under the age of 35. The growing number of young people has created a labor supply that actually is greater than the job market, what the job market can accommodate. And currently, around 1 million young Kenyans are entering the job market, either having dropped out from the school or having completed high school or college or even university. So to meet this country's job demand, a total of almost 1 million new jobs have actually to be created annually. So this is an opportunity, but we have to factor that into the planning and the program execution. The last proposal and action we're proposing for this meeting is on the role of government in driving food systems transformation. The core drivers of food systems transformation in Kenya are the county governments. Counties are more familiar with the local economy than any other level of government. They are in close contact with the local stakeholders and ensure that policies are adapted to local conditions. They promote specific advantages and address important bottlenecks. The importance of county government in the agriculture and the agri-food system transformation does not mean that national government have no role to play. Both national and county government play complementary roles. Neither level can actually provide effective support for the economy without the contribution of the other. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as I come to close this keynote address, the question on the table here is, how do we want to build on the momentum that was created by the UN Food Systems Conversation and Dialogue and the summit that took place in September 2021. Kenya is among the countries that put forward the food systems pathways and committed to translate them into action. And my own president, Dr. Kalibata, was the special envoy for this conversation, as I mentioned earlier on. And we want to build on that momentum and address actually the challenges and deliver a real result on the ground for our farmers, food work, and the small and medium enterprises. As AGRA, we are committed to supporting this continental agenda broadly, but most importantly in Kenya, and we'll continue working with our leadership as a continuation of the progress towards achieving both the CAADP but also the SDGs targets. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment for collective action is now, and the cost of inaction is high. There is a recent report, which I normally read a lot, from the World Bank that shows that the cost of doing nothing today in terms of mitigating the impact of climate change alone is about $200 billion a year. But if you look at the cost of acting, is only $15 billion a year. So it's quite expensive doing nothing than actually investing. Being able to work together and building a critical mass that drives institutions, technology, practices that lead towards sustainability of our food systems is critical. Together, we can achieve this, and if we do, we will be probably the last generation to be surrounded by hunger and poverty. As AGRA, we believe that we all have the answers on how best to transform the rural communities into vibrant economies, while at the same time having women and youth at the center of this transformation. Let's stand together to transform agricultural and food systems in Kenya. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you, Excellency.
A better round of applause for JJ for that very lucid and incisive presentation for this breakout session. Let me take this opportunity to appreciate JJ for a presentation well done, and he has already asked us a few questions which we will debate, will form the basis of our debate. We now have the moderator, my good friend Vinay Vitukuru, who is a senior agriculture economist at the World Bank, to come and moderate the panel discussion, and also to ask the members of the panel to come forward so that they can begin making their presentations after the moderator takes over. Let's take this opportunity to welcome Vinay Vitukuru from the World Bank, who has been very, very useful to our devolved systems in dealing with agriculture. Welcome, Vinay.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your kind words, and thank you very much for inviting me as the moderator of this exciting session. So without further ado, may I request the fellow panelists to kindly come and take their seat on the dais. To start, His Excellency Governor Ken Lusaka, Governor for Bungoma County, and also the Chairman for the COG Committee on Agriculture. May I now request Honorable Franklin Linturi, the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development, to kindly come onto the dais. May I now request Mr. David Gosney, Mission Director, USAID, Kenya and East Africa. Please come, David. Now I'd like to request Ms. Carla Mukavi, the FAO country rep, to kindly come onto the dais. Ms. Michelle Kagari, Global Director for One Acre Fund. Please come onto the dais, Michelle. And last but not the least, Talash Hybers, the Chief Executive Officer for Insectro. Please come onto the dais, Talash. And of course, Governor, His Excellency, Governor Benjamin Chavoy, he is very much part of the panel. So, as I request my panelists to come in, one request, I know we are doing not so well on time, so if you can kindly keep your remarks to about 7 to 10 minutes, I think that will be great. To start with, I want to kind of invite Governor Ken Lusaka. Sir, I think if you look at the agriculture sector, how do you evaluate the transformation of the county agriculture sector over the past decade, and what are the key milestones reached? If you could also kindly reflect on the key strategies for strengthening intergovernmental collaboration to enhance food production. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, moderator of the session. My name is Kenneth Lusaka, Governor Bungoma and Speaker Emeritus of the Senate. Like has already been said, I think agriculture is our mainstay as a country. Our economy is based on the agriculture, and for the last 10 years, we have to say that agriculture has contributed to 22.4% of the GDP, for example, in 2021, which was the highest share in Africa. It was also the source of employment. A lot of our people are employed in agriculture all over the country. And then again, 60% of Kenya's merchandise exports in 2020 actually came from the agricultural sector, which is very, very, very good. We had a slight decline in 2022 because of COVID, which affected almost all the sectors. We had a slight decline of 1.9. Sugarcane had picked up so well, but again, in the last about 2 or so years, sugarcane has gone down, and we are having conversations with the national government. I think there's a lot that is ongoing now to see how we can revive Nzoia, Mumias. As we even speak now, all the factories except Narok have closed down because of lack of sugarcane. So this is an area that we want to address so that we get back there. Livestock also contributed grew by 1.6% to the GDP. And the fisheries also grew. We were able to earn over $221 million during that period. The county governments, because this is a devolved function, in 2022-23, county governments invested a total of 334 billion in the agriculture sector, which is also very, very, very high. You find that most of the counties are putting most of their funding in agriculture. We were able to procure 362 tractors across the country. 1.508 metric tons of assorted seeds were also distributed to the farmers. 1.922 cash crops and fruit trees were also distributed to throughout the country. And with 2.968 fish fingers also given out. And then in the livestock sector, we had 2.673 animals vaccinated and 87,920 stores of semen procured, which also covered the entire country. Now, for the intergovernmental collaboration to flourish, because that's where we have had a bit of challenges. Even now, right now, we're just addressing the issue of saying that the national government is performing functions that are supposed to be performed by the county governments. I think we are in a discussion where we are complementing each other, national government and the county government, so that what's most important, for example, for the counties is to ensure, for example, the distribution of fertilizer, the last mile fertilizer, the farmer gets the fertilizer, and now it has come down from 7,000 to 2,500. There's a lot of excitement down there, because before that, then it was a big challenge. But for that to happen, we must have joint planning with the national government, which I must thank the minister and his team that we are currently having cordial working relationship, maybe because we worked with the current CS in the Senate, and we have been good friends. There must be full operationalization of the agriculture sector mechanism for consultation and cooperation, that's the JASCOM, which should be a regular forum for us to be meeting and to discuss what we want to discuss. Regularization of the county agricultural sector steering committees, CASCOMs, for continuous dialogue at the county level together among the stakeholders at that particular level. If this was also activated and kept alive, it will play a bigger role. Then we also need to strengthen collaboration in project implementation, that's the co-funding and the joint policy development as instruments for building trust and alignment, so that we are not conflicting. And then also we need to prioritize the review of legislation and regulations in the sector to ensure they are updated and aligned to the Constitution to reduce conflict. Because when we know exactly who is supposed to do what, it reduces a lot of conflict among the two levels of government. Then, of course, the challenges, I'm just addressing all of them so that maybe if anything will come up, I'll come back later. Some of the challenges have been access to agricultural financing. For example, 4% of the commercial banks is in agribusiness, yet most of the people are actually employed in agriculture. Then there's also low use of fertilizer and other agricultural inputs. I think this was as a result of the high cost. You can imagine a farmer down there in the rural areas purchasing one bag of fertilizer at 7,000. It has really been a burden, but I think with the cost coming down, we are going to see an uptake of the use of fertilizer, and we are going to encourage that. Then there's low irrigation. I think we depend on rainfall. 83% of Kenya's land areas, you know, is arid and semi-arid, and only about 2% is under irrigation, which is like compared to what the average percentage in Africa is 6%, and Asia is 37%. So we'll need to challenge that instead of relying on rain agriculture, we also get into irrigation. So those are some of the challenges that maybe we are facing in the sector, and we should be addressing to be able to increase production. And of course, the way forward will be to improve the bottom-up economic transformation agenda better, which has outlined most of the things that really need to be done. This was based on the facts that were collected when I think the Kenya County administration went round that time, talking to farmers and talking to all stakeholders on what they wanted to do. So a lot of the recommendations are already captured in what I've said. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you so much for keeping the time. And I want to recognize that as the lead for the World Bank Agriculture, I have firsthand seen how Your Excellency, you and the Cabinet Secretary and the Principal Secretary have really gone out of your way to ensure better national-county collaboration. So this is great news for the agriculture sector in Kenya. So thank you so much for your remarks, sir. Let me come to His Excellency Governor Benjamin Cheboy. Sir, I think, as you know, livestock farming is a vital source of livelihood in the Sal counties. Considering the last decade, how would you assess the performance of the livestock sector? What are the key milestones achieved and critical challenges that have been faced? And what specific opportunities you think, sir, exist for the Asal counties to further develop and transform the meat and leather sectors and other sectors, which will encourage jobs generation? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vituku. Livestock farming is a vital source of livelihood, especially in the Asal areas, arid and semi-arid lands, counties, and presents significant potential for economic development. Considering the last decade, livestock farming is a vital source of livelihood in Asal counties, and also other counties that rely on dairy farming. This provides income and employment for millions of people. The sector is worth $10 billion, contributing 10% of the GDP and 43% of the agriculture GDP. Red meat and the dairy sector collectively make up 75% of the livestock sector GDP. The sector has the potential to contribute significantly to economic development in these areas, but it faces a number of challenges. In the last decade, there have been some key milestones achieved in the livestock sector in ASAL counties, such as increased livestock productivity through the introduction of improved breeds and better management practices. I can tell you all counties have procured livestock and AI services for their people, and that has led to the increase of productivity. Increased access to markets through the development of new trade routes and the construction of infrastructure. I can tell you in almost most counties, particularly the ASAL counties, with the support of the World Bank and the national government, we have been able to build markets and create infrastructure for marketing of products. Increased investment in the sector from both the public and the private sectors. A lot of Kenyans in the private sector have also invested in the sector through investment in the beef marketing processes or milk processing processes, such that it can improve the livestock sector in our counties. I'm not saying it's just in the ASAL counties, it's in all counties where livestock is a source of income. However, there are still a number of challenges that need to be addressed. These include, but not limited to, drought and other climate change related events that can have had a devastating impact on livestock production. Last year alone, I think Kenyan farmers lost upwards of 2 million animals due to drought. And this, of course, is related to climate change. The increased frequency and impact has really affected availability of feed and lack of access to credit and other financial services, which can make it difficult for farmers to invest in their businesses. The truth of the matter is that the biggest challenge we have in the livestock sector is animal feed, both in quantity and in quality. If there is any area that government, both tiers of government, must invest in to be able to realize greater productivity in the livestock sector, it is in the manufacture of feeds, both for beef and for dairy. We also have a challenge of poor infrastructure, which can make it difficult to transport livestock to the markets. A lot of our livestock in Kenya are to be found in northeastern counties and in the North Rift. And these counties have got one unique characteristic: the infrastructure for transportation. By the time you are transporting animals from Mandera, Garissa, Wajir, all the way to the markets in Nairobi, it will be very expensive for you to do that. And by the time you are reaching Nairobi, the cost of transportation is almost greater than the cost of sales, in addition to the cost of production of the livestock. And remember that we have got very few livestock processing plants, meat processing plants in these regions. They have to come to urban areas like Nairobi so that they can be processed there. Low value addition. Only 1% of the cattle going through feedlots and 25% of milk is being processed. So a lot of our milk that is produced within the livestock production areas is transported raw to milk processors in Nairobi and other urban centers. That is the challenge. The biggest challenge, of course, is the fact that there is declining productivity. This is something that we need to address, and this is something that we need to debate on in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you so much for so clearly articulating the issues of the ASAL counties.
Thank you.
And as a representative of development partners, I'd like to assure you that we are truly committed to supporting the ASAL counties on all the issues that you very well articulated.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for your remarks, sir. I would now request Honorable Linturi, the Cabinet Secretary, to come in. I have a special bond with you, sir. You are the only person who addresses me by my complicated last name, Vutukuru. And I look at it very affectionately, so thank you so much. My parents will be very happy that somebody is calling me Vutukuru. So, sir, I think the question to you is, what strategies and policies is the ministry devising to revitalize the agriculture sector and improve our food security? And how is the ministry addressing the digital divide to ensure that the benefits of these digital technologies are accessible to all farmers regardless of their scale of operations? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Vitkru. And I think before I get to answering your question, allow me really appreciate the conveners or the governors for this important event and for inviting me to be a panelist in this discussion, and especially on the sub-theme of this discussion, which is strong food systems for food security and inclusive growth, and how we can create the pathways of transforming our county food systems. This thing will not have come at a better time than now, because I think this topic is important that we discuss it candidly, because the world is threatened because of lack of food. I was a participant in the UN Food Systems Summit in Rome, and when I had discussion to address the team and the leaders that were there, I realized that it is not only Kenya or Africa that is threatened. The world is threatened, and our action today is what will really be able to address the problem of food in the future. And for that matter, there is need for us to work very closely and come up with a proper food system that is sustainable, that will be able to feed the ever-growing population, understanding that the land in which we sit is not expanding. Our population is going to double, just like as it has been mentioned. So the time we have, at a time we are having this discussion, I think is really timely. It is good that we start getting our house in order, because we really have to think outside the box. And for the question that you raise, in my view, because by the nature of our constitutional architecture and how we are supposed to relate, I think our relationship with the governors, we are like Siamese twins. We are conjoined at the hip, and we must work together to ensure that the mandate of feeding the people of this country is achieved. And no, it doesn't have a lot, it is not respectful that we speak about lack of food 60 years after independence, yet we are endowed with a very strong, healthy workforce, very good arable land. And though the effects of climate change have really hit us, I think we can be able to see how else we can plan ourselves and really do some bit of irrigation to create food for ourselves. So the ministry, my ministry, right now is really focused on coming up with the strategies and policies that are meant to address this. And by way of example, or mentioning a few, we're implementing the agricultural policy that is aimed at improving our food and nutrition security, which will end up maximizing incomes through optimal utilization of resources in this agricultural sector. You know, we have the agricultural sector transformation and growth strategy, ASTGS, and which has the 9 flagship programs, and which we are trying to, through the land anchor of increasing small-scale farmer, pastoralist, fish, folk incomes, and value addition, and increasing household food resilience, so that we are able to reduce the number of people that are food insecure from the 2.7 million to possibly the least minimum numbers that are possible. We also want to mention that we have the session of paper 2 of 2020 on the veterinary policy, which is meant to safeguard the animal health and welfare, increase animal production and productivity, and also promote trade in animals and animal products. Recently, we've started processing the livestock bill through Parliament that will provide a regulatory framework for largely previously unregulated livestock sector industries, which is very critical for livestock-based livelihoods and, of course, for the national economy. We don't also forget to mention that we are working on developing the livestock master plan that will be able to provide accurate data and information on livestock resources and for available investments. We also working very closely towards implementing and adopting and implementation of the National Agricultural Soil Management Policy of 2023, which will focus mainly on effective soil management, so that we are able to have soils that can support food production and on growth. Of course, the agricultural mechanization policy is so critical because we want to sustainably raise the level of agricultural mechanization for increased productivity and income of our agricultural producers, because when we mechanize, we will be effectively be able to use our land efficiently, and the time that would have ordinarily taken by use of the normal labor will be minimized. I realize there is also the question how we are doing in terms of digital, on getting access, our farmers getting information. I must say without shame that we've really worked so hard on this particular space, and even as we sit here, because we understand what digital innovation and the potential it has to transform and accelerate solutions, we have right now on the e-citizen platform that the President was launching the other day. My ministry has already onboarded 936 services that are available online. And before I got here, I am also proud to say I visited a farmer in this particular county called Edwin Ruto. Edwin Ruto is a 35-year-old farmer who has been able to access or get guidance from the various digital solutions that we have given to our farmers. He's been able to get an advisory on weather, on the type of crop to grow, and out of his own confession today, that he tells us that out of this advice he was able to plant barley, he was able to apply the necessary fertilizers, is a beneficiary of the fertilizer subsidy program that we are running, and is projecting to do 40 bags of maize from 1 acre, meaning that out of doing his 5 acres is the potential of doing getting 200. We are very pleasantly pleased to see him introduce us to his children, what he has done through the support of this system, the kind of house he is building, and the kind of maize that is on his farm. So we're getting our farmers registered into one big database, which we have already been able to achieve, getting 5.2 million farmers registered. And the support we are also getting from development partners, because this registration exercise is continuing, so that we are able to capture the farmers, all the farmers in this country, to have this accurate data, because this accurate data won't be able to assist us so much in planning. We are getting to areas because we understand now that positioning of making sure we have our farmers, we are able to know where they are, and through technology, it also becomes very easy because When that is achieved through the process that we are undertaking, we will also even be able to now advise through satellite what type of fertilizer, what support our farmers will be able to do. So we really appreciate technology, and we are very committed to ensuring our team or our farmers have the best advisory within the shortest time possible. E-extension service is something that we also seriously working on and trying to promote, so that our farmers are able to get this information. So farmers this country can be able to access this information, because we feel once it is done, then it will be easy to do business, because agriculture, as where we see it, is business because of its potential to create more employment and women that we have in. Because we're also very focused on value addition, agro-processing, and manufacturing. We will be able to create raw material to really support these other industries, which ordinarily will not be easy without really giving proper capacity to our farmers to be able to give us the right raw material for us to achieve this end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable CS. I think, thank you so much for very clearly articulating your both the policy kind of vision and the implementation around both the agriculture and livestock sectors. Thank you for reiterating your kind of commitment to having the right kind of coordination with the county governments, very, very critical. Thank you for reiterating that. And also thank you for sharing the personal story of Edwin Ruto. I think it always is very valuable when you share personal stories. Thank you so much, sir. May I now request David from USAID to come in. So David, if you can reflect on what are the key lessons from the programs that you can share with county governments, and how we can fast-track economic transformation through agriculture. And considering that agriculture is a devolved sector, how has USAID tailored its agriculture programming to meet diverse county needs and strategies? Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you all today, with practitioners from the national government, the county government, farmers, NGOs. Habari zenu. So first, I want to state the obvious. One of the key lessons learned and how important it is to stay hyper-focused on impact. I state that should be obvious, but as a development organization and professional, in self-reflection, sometimes we lose sight of the real end objective. And by impact, I mean impact at the farmer level, that farmer household. And that's why everything we try to do, we try to make sure that the farmers are the center of agricultural production and our activities and keep them sort of in the focus. And as His Excellency mentioned, it's so important when you're talking about impact to really keep in mind three things: efficiency, effectiveness, and competitiveness. And I can give you a couple examples, and these are in the spirit of continue to share thoughts and practices from around the world and what we're working on here in response to some of the critical issues that have been put forth today. So we're all very aware how connected the global economy is today. We saw the tremendous impact had on food and fertilizer prices, the Russian invasion into Ukraine, and the whole commodity price spike that we saw from that, and how important it was to provide relief to farmers here in Kenya who needed to get access to those inputs. And as His Excellency was mentioning, the fertilizer subsidy program that was of such benefit to so many farmers. And that was a tremendous impact. One of the things that Kenya has is a tremendous private sector as well. over 30,000 agro dealers all around the country. And one way that has been used in the past, in addition, is to provide farmers directly with vouchers that they can then take to agro dealers. So in some cases, it's hard to get to some of the NCP processing centers, which are really important processing centers, but there's also agro dealers who can supply inputs. And one of the things that we tried to work on is how we could give vouchers that they could take to any one of the 30,000 agro dealers and use them either for seeds or fertilizers or what they have identified through the provision of extension services, through all the knowledge that has been shared with them from programs from the national government and county government, so that they can get those inputs that are most critical to them in the time that's most critical for them. So that's just a way of sharing, experiencing, and continuing to learn about how to use those precious resources as we go forward. The second thing is on effectiveness. You know, we all work on building research and then enabling farmers to use that research. But that connectivity is sometimes lost. But it's so important to stay focused on, because we need to take the research and technology that's being identified and then scale it. Because if we don't scale it, it's not really benefiting the farmers. So, for example, the other day I was at a really, really interesting local organization here called Plant Village. They're working with Penn State University on how to produce very cheaply the little pests that attack armyworm. So by using those pests, farmers can attack armyworm without having to use pesticides. Those pesticides are 2/3 the cost. So at about 1/3 of the cost, by using locally productioned pests that attack armyworms, farmers can get the same result. And that's fantastic, and have had tremendous impact from 1,000 farmers that they've been partnering together. But there's 3 million farmers that do corn. So the key there is how to take technologies that are others that are being developed throughout Kenya with the national government and the county government and scale it. And that's where the private sector comes in. That's where the focus on bringing in private sector investment, business planning is really important. You know, most recently it was highlighted that we partnered with Kintegra to enable investment back into the pyrethrum sector. So for example, initial support from USAID to Kintegra enabled them to develop a business model where they were then able to go out and get additional financing from the Development Corporation for the US and private sector financing. So now they're working with 2,500 farmers, trying to scale up to 90,000 farmers, who each sometimes work with up to 9 farmers. Now we're getting at nearly 1 million farmers, hopefully in the future, who can be earning an income by revitalizing the pyrethrum sector as we go forward as well. And lastly is the issue of competitiveness. The reason we were focused on the pyrethrum sector is we knew Kenya could be a leader in that. The reason we knew that is Kenya used to be a leader in that. It used to be the major supplier of pyrethrum for a world. But because of the competitive environment, it lost that whole market. And we're seeing some similar challenges, for example, as people are aware in the coffee sector currently. Kenya used to produce about as much coffee as Kenya just about a decade ago. Now Uganda is producing 10 times the amount of coffee that Kenya is. And some of that has to do with the enabling environment here. And that's why it's really important to focus on that. And sometimes there's unintended consequences. One of the things that's been highlighted here is how important it is for counties to be able to generate their own source revenue. Very important. And there's a lot of really important discussions about how to do that. But one of the things that sometimes is unintended, for example, is goods, including sometimes agricultural goods as they move through Kenya. You know, they collect taxes, the cess, right? An important source of revenue. But the unintended consequences for that is that if an agricultural product moves from, say, northern or central Kenya down to the coast, say to Mombasa, that cost that is added can be 8% or more. 8% is a lot of money when you're talking about profit. That makes those products much less competitive. So the unintended consequences currently is that if you're living in Mombasa, you're often buying vegetables from Tanzania, not from central Kenya or not from the north, right? And so that's not the goals and objective that I know everybody's working for, but it's something that's really important to stay focused on, because those revenues are really important, but it's important to create the enabling environment, hopefully develop businesses, and then develop the revenue on the back end as businesses continue to grow and flourish. And I know everybody is very focused on all these issues and continuing to make Kenya competitive. We've heard all the great successes that have been had to date over the past year and more, in due in part, a large part to the leadership you see here up on the stage. And most importantly, all that you all are doing as farmers, civil society organizations, and others. So congratulations to you all. Done a tremendous work, and I'm sure more to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. 4 very clear takeaways. The focus on impact, I think well said. Role of private sector, I think that's very, very important in the agriculture sector in Kenya. 30,000 agro dealers indeed is a very, very large network. How do we leverage them is very, very critical. I like what you said about really connecting research to extension and then scaling it up. And you gave a specific example. And also the last issue which you raised, I think it's a very, very fundamental issue. How do you rationalize the whole taxation on goods, agriculture commodities? I think that's a very important part of the enabling environment. So thank you so much for your thoughts, David. May I now request Michelle, the Global Director for One Acre Fund, to come in and share her thoughts on what has One Acre Fund achieved in collaboration with counties in promoting food security and inclusive growth, and what can you cite as main barriers to public-private partnership models in the Kenya agricultural landscape? Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you, Vinay, and hi, everyone. I think a lot of what I'm going to say is going to build off of what has been said previously by Waheshimi was here, and also by Mr. Gosni. Mr. Gosni mentioned the connectedness in the global economy. And we've spent the morning talking about revenue and revenue share and own source revenue. And one of the things that really struck me that is providing an overall framing for my remarks is, one, the complexity that's there. I know it's obvious, but a food system is a highly complex and dynamic system. There are very many different dimensions. There are very many different actors. And it's not just one solution. It will be multiple solutions happening at the same time at multiple levels. And so when we talk about transforming a food system, you do need to look at upstream primary production issues, yes. But that's not sufficient. You do need to look at the role of government, the role of the county. That's critical, but it's insufficient. And so a lot of my remarks are going to be focused on another part of the system, which is the private sector. And some of the ways in which we can incentivize, or counties can incentivize, increased private sector investments in the agriculture sector. I'd say one of the things that we all agree, and I really liked the Aliam Heshua who mentioned that county governments are the engine of rural development. County governments are the drivers of the rural economy. I couldn't agree with that statement more. At the same time, we recognize the challenges that the county governments face. We've spent the morning talking about the resource constraints. And it's a balance between generating revenue or collecting revenue and wealth creation. And one of the ways in which I think county governments can really make interventions that would incentivize private sector investments would be by creating that enabling policy regulatory environment. You know, government has a huge role to play, but we need to all do it together. The challenges that we are facing are unprecedented. Climate change and the impact of climate change is unprecedented. So being able to create that space for all actors to come in, invest in the areas where there are gaps in the system, and have and do innovation, as Mr. Gosni mentioned, when you've got very innovative things that are having an impact, you want to encourage that. So that's one of the biggest things for me that county governments can do to attract private sector investment, creating that enabling policy and regulatory environment, creating an enabling tax environment that will actually result not just in improved food systems, but also incentivized wealth generation. And that will make the pie much bigger. The second most important thing that I think county governments can do, and Honorable Cicely mentioned it in the morning, was investing more in leveraging the PPP frameworks. The government has a huge role, and actually the role of government is to set and define what are the rules of the game, if you will. So like, what are the priorities of the government that's going to result in an outcome that has a good, that will improve food systems for all Kenyans. So as Honorable Linturi mentioned, there are all the policies that are being developed requiring investments in digitization, investments in input provision, investments to make information more accessible, increase knowledge of farmers, improve aggregation, access to markets. Like, establishing those priorities is very much the role of government. The other thing is, when you have those policies and the strategy set, are the actions that are being taken sending the signals so that private sector actors can know, oh, this is an area where actually we can invest, and this is an area where government encourages through incentives and other means for us to invest. And that's where PPPs provide a really good pathway. It can enable, I think we've already had public-private partnerships for infrastructure development. Within the agriculture sector, it's not just the roads, it's not just logistics, it's issues like cold storage systems. It's issues like having county government supporting and facilitating SME access to markets, supporting and setting up the standards and enabling farmers to meet the standards that will require sustained access to those international markets. When it comes to then PPPs and engaging with government, engaging with private sector, because of the complexity, it's not as easy as it sounds. And this is where like some of the challenges and opportunities come in. And one of the challenges, which frankly everyone is facing, county governments are facing them, the Kenya government is facing it, private sector, SMEs are also facing, agribusiness, farmers, is access to financing. There is insufficient financing. And there's, I think, a lot of room to explore and design financial products that will speak to those kinds of needs, that will actually facilitate and incentivize investments in those sectors by private sector. So that's one of the challenges, but also an opportunity. The second challenge is the clarity of policy, the clarity of the regulatory environment. But again, that's something that can be fixed, you know. Stating very clearly which is the role of government. The county governments are so well placed to do this, to say, okay, this is what we want to be done. This is how we shall incentivize that. These are the vehicles through which we will bring together all actors so that we can address this thing holistically, taking a systems approach. And that would really help resolve some of the main challenges that are there. And then the final challenge, but also an opportunity that, again, you referenced, was scalability and sustainability. When we are looking at transforming a food system, making sure that the investments that are made into projects result in impact and outcomes that can then be sustained is a huge challenge. And I think this is something that not just Kenya, but everything in I think all other markets, it's a continuous challenge. Being able to find innovative ways that actually work, that can be sustainably scaled. And that's where I think for me, using a vehicle of PPPs, where you're enabling innovation, you're like, let's put our heads together, everyone with your particular skill set, how do we find ways to make sure that these interventions, when they work, they are sustainable. One of the challenges was mentioned earlier of having the white elephant projects, or something is done and then it just stalls. And when we are looking at overcoming these challenges of investments, really making sure that one of the factors that's driving all decisions is how sustainable is this? How scalable is this? Will there be ownership of this? Is this something that is regenerative or not? Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for so clearly articulating the expectations of the private sector. I think you were spot on when you said enabling policy and regulatory environment is absolutely critical. I think making the PPP framework work, I think the onus is clearly on the government, and I fully take that point. Access to financing, I think everybody, that's a huge constraint for everyone, and the issue of sustainability is very, very important. So thank you so much for those remarks, Michelle. Let me now invite Carla, my good friend Carla, to come in. Carla, so can you reflect on what are the key impediments to Kenya's food sovereignty plans? I also know that FAO launched its strategy 2023-2027. What opportunities exist under this strategy for the county governments?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vinay, and Jambo. Yes, in addressing this question, and actually I was just thinking that it's always a challenge and a risk to speak almost at the end, because everything has been said actually, and the challenges were really very clearly really presented. But let me start by saying that actually, as we discuss, and particularly to address the question that you raised, we should also take into consideration that actually we are not on track to attain SDG 2 of ending hunger and ensuring food security and nutrition by 2030. The last report that was published by FAO jointly with the WFP, UNICEF, and also WHO really clearly states that the number of people facing food insecurity is rising. In Africa, actually, the keynote speaker rightly put it, we are really talking about almost 20% of the African population. And in Kenya also, we really saw what happened with the drought, which we know that the smallholder farmers are still really struggling to recover from this prolonged and severe drought that really impacted in their lives and livelihoods. And of course, one of the reasons is really climate change. Climate change is really impacting, and it will be very important that in those policies that we are talking about, we look at building resilience to adapt and really to mitigate climate change. I really want to welcome, of course, the decision of the government of Kenya through the leadership of President Ruto by convening the Climate Action Summit that will take place in September, where FAO and I know that other development partners and the counties are clearly involved. Yesterday, we really listened to this inspiring inaugural speech by the President of the Republic when, of course, opening the Devolution Conference, where he mentioned that we have to unlock the potential that agriculture offers. He really talked about land, arable land in the continent and also here in Kenya. He talked about this vibrant, really workforce, young people and women that are really so energetic and so skilled. And he talked also about really so many other issues that is there where we can really contribute to that food sovereignty and really food security. And the challenges actually are really very clear. When you mention, Vinay, that we just launched as FAO our counter-programming framework that will really cover the action and the support that we are going really to provide to the government of Kenya, and particularly to the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development in ensuring, of course, food security and nutrition. And there we are really looking at two anchors. And one of the anchor is really sustainable and resilient, nutrition-sensitive agro-food systems. And the other one is really looking at the governance and the social inclusion in agro-food systems. And it's really important here to mention, again, going back to the issue of the challenges, policy. How are we able to attract the right policies? Governor Lusaka mentioned that we have to review some of them, maybe we have to improve some of them, maybe we have to create some of them, but we really need strong policies, because those are the policies that will really unlock that potential and attract the private sector that Michelle was saying, that you have to create that enabling environment that can really attract private sector. The other challenge that I see, and we know that really the percentage of lending, and it has been said also here, is very, very minimal. If you don't have really access to credit, if you don't have access to inputs, there is no way you can really improve and reach that food sovereignty. I think is one of the issues that we have to look at it very closely. And of course, the other issue that was also mentioned is coordination. Coordination at the national level, coordination at the county level, coordination between county and of course at the national. It's so critical. And maybe I should really say that the UN is really spearheading very important really tools. One of them is really to map all the actors that are really relevant and they're really working in the space of the food systems, so that we can also make sure that, of course, we target the interventions. Where are the challenges? So this is an exercise that actually I want to also welcome, because Kenya is a piloting country on mapping the food systems. This is really very important. And the other one that we talk about, which is another challenge, is really, of course, the national expenditure. The keynote speaker also mentioned about the Malabo Declaration and the commitment of the 10% of the GDP that should be really invested, because if we are not investing, there is no way we can really have this positive outcome. And there is a tool that we are also piloting in Kenya that is really trying to track the financing that is going into the food systems, because this will allow, again, to target, but at least to identify the gaps so that we can really better target the interventions. So I should say that, of course, partnership in all, of course, those interventions and actions is really critical. The government cannot do it alone. The county governments cannot do it alone. We really need all hands on deck. Make sure that we bring the private sector, we really unlock that vibrant and robust that Kenya has when we look at the private sector, which is only 55%, if I'm not mistaken, that is really investing in agriculture. We're talking about something like 9 billion of Kenyan shillings. It's quite robust. 90 billion actually of Kenyan shillings when you talk about private sector. If we compare to the 3 billion that the government is really able, of course, to harness. And I think to say that, of course, the opportunities that the counter programming framework that we just launched jointly with the government of Kenya through the Ministry of Agriculture, this has been really a very engaging and consultative process where we really brought all stakeholders to really identify what are the needs, what are their priorities. And it's very important to mention that actually this also happened after the engaging national dialogues, where again Kenya was so involved that really prepared the country to participate in the, of course, the Food System Summit. And the pathways that came from this dialogue are really very clear. Nutrition is very critical, and we know that this is one of the challenges. Climate action, again, do we need to build that resilience? The issue of data, technologies, and the innovation. We need to cascade this at the county level so that it can really be domesticated and also institutionalized. And of course, the focus on young people and women. And actually, there is another pathway that is coming from the stock taking summit that took place in Rome, through, again, this engaging and consultative process that Kenya has really put in place, to a task force that is really looking at how to advance this agenda, which is, again, partnership and funding. So I really want to say that the opportunities to work together so that we can really implement what we are able to identify as programs and projects is there. And this is what we really want to achieve through the counter-programming framework. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, Governor Lusaka has to leave because he has another meeting. Apologies from his side. Thank you so much, Carla. I think very well articulated. I really like how you highlighted the coordination bit, partnerships. I think you've heard it from multiple people here. The importance of data, I think that's very, very critical. Also, I think the tool to track financing in this sector is very, very important. So thank you so much for your articulation. Last but not the least, I promised Talash that I'll get her last name right. Hybers. I hope I got it right. Talash, clearly you are the youngest on the panel. you represent the youth. So a couple of questions for you. Can you share your experience on how young people can participate and drive agriculture transformation? And as a young innovator, how do you foresee the future of the country's agriculture sector with the advent of digitalization? Over to you.
As my colleague mentioned, it's always hard to go last, so I will raise this very specific question to you later. But my name is Talash. I'm 27. I definitely think I'm the youngest person on this panel. And I have a bit of a strange day job. I actually run one of the largest insect farms in East Africa, and not the IPM bugs you were talking about, but insects for food and feed. So my degree is in agriculture because I believe we all need to eat at the end of the day, so I will always have a day job. But when I graduated university, I wanted to farm fish because I believe white meat is the next frontier in livestock production and chicken are smelly, so fish just made a lot of sense. When we're looking at the factors needed to farm fish, in Kenya we have good climate, we have good water, we have plenty of land, cheap labor, so all the factors should be conducive for us to be able to grow fish at an affordable rate and farmers to make money. The one thing that a lot of people don't consider, and I'm glad that Honorable raised it, is animal feed. So animal feed makes up 60 to 80% of the cost of production for a farmer, and in animal feed, 60% of that cost is protein. In Kenya, we know soy, we know fish meal, black cottonseed cake, plenty of other alternatives, but I thought, why farm protein at the end of the chain when there's a bigger gap in feed? And then literally went to the school of Google and YouTube and kind of landed on insects. So we have two very exciting insects at InsectiPro. We have the black soldier fly, which is my mom calls it Dandora. It's a really big flies you see in Dandora. It's not a tessie fly, they're not dangerous, but they're big flies and they're very high in protein. They're really cool insects because they eat waste. So I know I don't look like a garbage collector, but that's also a very big part of my day job. So far, over the last 4 years, we've recycled 7,000 metric tons of organic waste, which was headed for landfills, brought it to our facility, and then transformed it into high-value protein and fertilizer. This was a saving of 4,500 metric tons of carbon, so climate change. And what this resulted in is what we're seeing is better growing times for animals. So pigs, instead of taking 6 to 8 months to grow nimuru, they're now ready in 5.5 months, meaning farmers can do more cycles per year. We're also seeing that the fly poop is pretty incredible soil amender. We tested it in maize, sorghum, tea, and testing it right now in coffee. And in maize and sorghum, we saw yield increases from 22% all the way up to 50%, especially in Meru, and a bit 30% in Bomet. Our other insect is crickets. Our crickets go into our human nutrition program. I can see a lot of you thinking, but my colleague here can attest to how tasty they are, right? And crickets are very high in protein, iron, and zinc, which a lot of Kenyans tend to be very deficient in. The exciting thing about crickets is we can transform them. If I gave a lot of people in this room a whole fish, you would struggle to eat it, but if I gave you a fish fillet, it would be a lot easier to eat. Same thing with crickets. As a whole, it's kind of a weird concept to eat, but as a powder, it's very easy to hide it as a nutritional supplement, especially in school feeding programs in Uji. To answer now your questions, how do we get more people into agriculture? I think currently one of the biggest problems with agriculture is image. When I ask a lot of my friends, my age mates, well, how do you see agriculture? They see a shosho in a field with a djembe digging the whole day, not making any money. If that is a prevailing image of agriculture, nobody's ever going to enter the sector. We need to show youth, or I guess my age mates, that agriculture is a combination of science, technology, innovation to create a more food sovereign Kenya. Currently, there are over 110 startups. I will share with you the list to include in your mapping, that are working in agri-tech, and most of them are run by young, amazing innovators. We need to show young people also that agriculture is not just food production, but the entire ecosystem around it. I think you already kind of alluded to it. You have to look at logistics. I've seen very interesting developments in Stola for cold storages. I've seen AI in dairy. I've seen payment platforms being developed for the coffee industry. And what was the last one? Our good friends at Twiga are also technically a logistics / a food production company. Those are all really incredible startups that exist in the space. Since I'm on this stage and government is here, I would like to request the government, again, back to enabling policies, to create a kind of sandbox, like they did for the Capital Markets Authority, like they did for M-Pesa, which will allow startups like myself and like other startups to start developing their technology while they build the regulation next to it. When we first started, people weren't sure whether to classify us as KWS, as Ministry of Environment, or Ministry of Agriculture. We technically fall under all three, but to get certification from all three was a challenge. For example, KWS, the only insect you can legally grow is a butterfly. That is regulation from like the 1980s, so how do we fit into that category? I think actually I have to shout out to KEBS and NEMA. NEMA allowed us to develop our tech while they came, very heavily audited every year to see what we're doing, see what we're building, see how waste recycling works. Same thing with KEBS. KEBS already have a certification for insects for food and insects for feed, and now working on an organic fertilizer certification for the insect poop. So we see how it is possible. We just like it to be possible in a bigger government area. I'd also like to be tax exempt if we're, shouting our wishes here for a few years, but it is what it is. I think we need to make agriculture accessible again so we can have a more interesting innovations being developed so we can lead to a more food secure but also nutritionally secure Kenya.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Talash. Solution, perhaps you can just link up with her. Great idea. It has twin benefits. On one hand, it's cheaper protein, and it's climate friendly. I like the solution of changing the image. Agriculture has to be cool and access go a long way to bringing youth into agriculture. I think expanding the narrow definition of agriculture and calling it the food systems, that's one way of making it cool. And I really like the sandbox idea. So thank you so much. Okay, that brings us to the end. I'm sure Robert has a message for me. Oh, okay. So I know we are way beyond our time, but we really want to bring the audience into the conversation. So we have time for just 2 questions. Robert, I hope you can pass the mic around. So any burning questions to anybody on the panel except me, because I'm the moderator, all questions exempted. Yes, the gentleman here, and of course, both the waziris. Maybe we can start with the CC Muranga, sir, and then we go to...
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Kiri Gai, I'm the CEC from Muranga, and I've been keen to listen to all the presentations. Particularly the mention of the private sector engagement and the role that the government is supposed to play. And I must say that the governor for the chair for the CEC, the chair of the agriculture framework of engagement with partners. And therefore, anybody who has any role that they want to play in the agricultural space in the counties is provided for. So maybe one of the things that I would persuade some of the presenters that made some presentations and made some comments associated with what the government should do is to know that that is already being done. How can we then go to the grassroots and join the CASCO and work with those that are on the ground so that we can do it together? Because I think if we live here and say that there is a gap here and we do not see what gains have already been achieved as of now, 10 years, given that we have a strategy, the structure is the CASCO and JASCO, and all the actors are there in place, like yourselves. Let us not pedal back on what gains have already been done. Let us now build on what the counties and the government has been doing. And I believe there is so much that has been done. We only are not working together. Everybody is starting their own program. Tunapanda, we want the fertilizer. I like the FAO approach because they always work together. We work together with the Vinay. Let us all work together. Let us identify what commodities or value chains we want to engage through. Then all the issues that we are raising can very easily be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations to all panelists for really highlighting the key issues in the sector. My name is Kiplimo Lagat. I'm the chair of the CC Caucus and the chair of the Caucus of Agriculture, also the CC for Agriculture in Nandi. I have a question. Unfortunately, I think the CS and the chair of the for the COG has left for agriculture, but I think because we have Governor Jeboy, my question, and I believe we have also, Governor has just left also, is that what should governors do? And I know you've been there in the first term as a governor. Most governors focused so much on health. They never supported, especially extension in devolution devolved units, that is. What would you advise your colleagues in allocating resources, especially to the last mile extension service? We notice that most counties no longer have the extension officers. Some have retired, and some are not, most of them are not recruiting extension officers to support agriculture, especially the last mile. We no longer have the front officers as it used to be in agriculture. The last person you find is at the ward level. While health, and I believe all donor community, I believe you're all aware about this. There's a lot of support for health. You even have what we call the community health workers, but nobody seems to be considering the technical support for agriculture. We all assume actually we are good experts in agriculture, even if you have not done agriculture. But agriculture is a technical sector just like health and education. While there's a lot also going on in ECD, employing the ECD teachers and all that, there's little going on to recruit our graduates in agriculture sector who are actually in the villages. What should counties do, and also among the donor community? How will you incentivize the last mile extension service? Number two, my question goes to the donor community, and I think that is what my colleague has alluded to. We all know that with devolution, all sectors have been struggling on how to provide a coordinating framework between the devolved units and the national government. For FAO, we have 1 acre fund, we have the USAID, we have the World Bank. And I think, Vinay, you've been doing quite well. And probably might want to answer, and what would you advise your colleagues in supporting the intergovernmental relationship framework that has been established in agriculture. I think you said is one of the culprits. They just work directly. They don't consider counties sometimes. You find they're working in some place in your county, and they're not probably looking at that as a framework. And I know FAO has done a lot also in working with us. What would you do to ensure that you can support agriculture, which is a devolved function, while the policies at the national level, we have some donor communities who still don't consider counties as critical implementing function for agriculture sector, and they prefer working only with the national government other than the county governments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So maybe the governor can start off, and then David, you can come in.
I can do that. Thank you very much, CC, for Nandi County Agriculture and chairman of the caucus of CCs. Those are very brilliant, very important questions. Why are governors or counties not investing in the last mile in extension when food security is supposed to be the solution to health problems? If you produce more food and good nutritious food for the nation, then you minimize health costs. That is where we should be going. And I think this is something that we need to discuss at the Council of Governors level and the Agriculture Committee. Of course, generally, the problem is wage bills and no money. And because health is overt, you will see the challenges of health overtly on the way the people are suffering, and you need to have them to be treated, which is an end result of poor agricultural systems. If we sorted out the agricultural systems, then there shall be sufficient nutritious food for the people, and we will not need to employ doctors. And that is the issue that we need to look at. And this, you're also right, donors are very quick to support health. In fact, one of the donors that supports health was here yesterday, Danida. They are supporting the last mile, supporting people who are working in dispensaries by paying their wages. If there's a way that the governors can partner with donors to support the extension services, which is key and fundamental. As for me, in my county, I am investing more in the recruitment of extension workers now that we are focusing on productivity. Because if the extension workers who are well equipped technologically, and even in terms of investing in the digital digitization of agriculture, then we cannot be able to succeed. And I agree with you. Maybe the national government together, county governments together with partners, need to have a sitting to see how we can finance or how we can motivate or how we can influence the recruitment of more extension workers, recruitment and training of more extension workers. And that should be a system of evaluation of the performance of counties. The productivity here is key. You cannot produce when you cannot teach the farmers on new technologies and new strategies of improving productivity at that particular point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for both the questions. And one of the best uses of this time and value is the open exchange and frank exchange of ideas and questions. And just to address a couple things. In terms of how USAID works at the county level, very much heard and understood and support, but very respectfully would push back a little bit that USAID's a culprit, so to speak. I would not push back that we can get better, but I want to highlight to you how we have moved and how much we are focused at the county levels. Sitting right to your right is an individual who is a representative of how we've pivoted, and we've got an individual identified who is the key liaison with a particular county. Because we recognize that we need to build those relationships with the counties, that the counties are at the center of, as we already said, actually implementation of being able to reach the farmers. We have restructured how USAID is actually structured, our personnel structure, with what we call county liaison teams. These are individuals who are dedicated to partnering with the county levels. And how do we partner? First and foremost, it's making sure that we are aligned with the county integrated development plans. That is where the rubber hits the road. That is what helps articulate at the county level what their priorities are, and everything that we do is meant to be integrated to that. And in fact, the very first trip I took out, I was in a county, and I wasn't with any USAID people, and it was the county representatives that briefed me on how what USAID was doing in that county. And we'd like to use that as a model. Now I want to reinforce what you said. That does not mean that we cannot get better. That's not, if you've got specific examples, I'm gonna walk down, I'm gonna give you my card, and please share with me your thoughts on how we continue to get better, partnering with the counties and with the communities in the counties. But that is not to say that the national government doesn't play a role. What was highlighted over here is how important it is for us to coordinate and identify those areas where we should be focused, those value chains that we should be focused on. And so we do that through implementation letters with the Ministry of Agriculture, who lets us know nationally, strategically, what are the value chains that are important for Kenya that we can focus on. So for example, through that, we've been told that avocados and mangoes are just two examples that, that they are recommending as part of their 2020, 2030 vision that are important for Kenya. And so we then take that, we then work at the county levels on how we can best implement that, because as you said, that's where implementation takes place. And in all my remarks in terms of just policies and taxation, all that's meant just to highlight of areas to collaborate and work together on it. And I wasn't referring, by the way, to national customs, which has made tremendous sort of strides, as was highlighted the other day by Ambassador Whitman. I was just referring to the unintended consequences of counties taxing goods as they move through the counties, as they move around, is an example of areas to be thoughtful of as we go forward, in the interest of collaboration and greater efficiency as we partner together with the counties going forward. So, but thank you very much for both those comments.
Thank you so much, David. Before we bring to an end, let me just drop my hat as a moderator and wear a World Bank hat. I think one specific learning for me, I've been here now almost for 5 years, in terms of engaging with the counties, and it's worked well, is to really leverage the COG platform, specifically the COG Committee on Agriculture and the CC Caucus platform. I think these are two great institutional platforms to work. I mean, we have projects across all 45 counties, and it's often very difficult transactionally to reach out to each one of the 45 counties on every issue. And we've used the COG platform, the COG Committee on Agriculture, the CC Caucus, to really reach out, and it's worked well so far. So I really encourage partners, donors to really use these platforms to work with counties. I know, John, you have your hand up. I am under the control of Robert Kitame. Do I allow one more question? Okay, go ahead, John.
Thank you very much, Vinay. My name is John Machari, and I'm the country manager for AGRA. And I actually wanted to start by putting everyone at bay. I think USAID, World Bank, FAO, IFAD, we've all worked over the last couple of years on concerted efforts to first of all domesticate the idea of a CASCOM. Because for those of you who remember the last 10 years, I think there was only a JASCOM. But because we needed to see that the strategy is implemented at the county, we also tried to have coordination happen at the very county level. So I want to assure you and to put you at peace that USAID and everyone else has actually been making every effort to try and get us to where we are. But the second thing I wanted, and this is to Governor Cheboy, and I really wish that the CS was here. I think it's okay, and I like the question that the CC raised around extension. But that is also making the conversation very production-driven, which is still important because we have food insecurity. But the question from the mission director is equally important, because if I tell you that milk coming from Elgeyo Marakwet, you will first collect tax from it, sales tax from it, then it comes to Uasin Gishu, perhaps someone also wants something. Then it gets to Nakuru, someone wants something. Then it gets to Nairobi. Those will be multiple points of taxation, and inherently, produce that you have worked so hard to create in Elgeyo Marakwet effectively becomes uncompetitive in Nairobi. And my question is, because I think this is perhaps the third or fourth year, or perhaps even the fifth, that there has been a conversation around agriculture produce cess. On one side, I don't know how it's done in your county. I think if you look at the potato, in some counties it's around the bag. If you move to the next county, it's perhaps around the kg. And if you move to the next county, it's actually the vehicle. So there is no harmony on one side, but also the multiple tax points is inherently making one side food in Nairobi expensive, but it's also making, you know, the production systems inherently uncompetitive throughout the chain. So I didn't want to buttress your point, but I actually think it's something that we need to have a clear way forward, even as we think about the cost of food and food inflation in this country. Thank you, and thank you for your patience.
I think, thank you very much, Macharia. The ideal situation is that there should be no multiple taxation. Ideal situation is that there should be no multiple taxation. If, for example, I, in Baringo County, produce watermelon, and it is destined to the city market in Nairobi, the only place it's supposed to be taxed should be within my county. Anything that goes to Nakuru and beyond, once a person produces a document that he has paid, says, in fact, that should be a ticket not to charge any cess. Ideally, cess should be charged at the originating county, but not the county that the product is going to be sold. That is the ideal situation, and I think the conversation that we need to discuss as Council of Governors is how can we enforce a situation where cess is only charged at one point, so that you do not, because if you charge, say, 100 shillings for a few kilos of watermelon in Baringo, it goes to Nakuru, another 100 shillings, it goes to Nyandarua, another 100 shillings, it goes to Kiambu, another 100 shillings, it goes to Nairobi, another 100 shillings. That's 600 shillings. That will make it absolutely uncompetitive for Baringo to produce and sell watermelon. So it's, since this is a policy making, perhaps a discussion, this is something that the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development can come together, the JASCOM can come together with the Council of Governors and agree that the enforcement of charging of cess is punitive to the counties that are producing, originating the products. The counties that are closest to the market will have an advantage over the counties that are farthest from the market. And this is definitely not the right way to go. And I do agree with the panelists that this must be addressed. It should be a national policy that must be implemented. Perhaps even we need to have a policy and legal framework that determines how this can be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, I think with that we have come to the end of this wonderful discussion. I think we've had a very, very vibrant discussion. Thank you to each one of my panelists. I think it was also to the COG for putting together a wonderful panel. We had the national government, the county government, the private sector, the startups, and the development partners were part of the panel. So thank you so much. Also, a big thank you to the audience for being such a wonderful audience and for asking the right questions. So thank you so much. I just want to end by saying one thing. I think the one thing which connects all of us in this room is our passion for agriculture sector.
That's right.
And I think agriculture sector has the potential to be a triple win. It can solve the climate problem, it can solve the food security problem, and it can solve the jobs problem, provided all of us sit together, work together. So I think sky's the limit. I think we've had a wonderful session. Thank you, everyone. And just two kind of announcements. You want to say something,
Yeah,
sir?
just
Please, sir.
finishing remarks. As we close the session, as we conclude this session, as the chair of this afternoon's session, I wish to thank you all for your contribution. Your reflections today are a true testimony that we can make agriculture better, more profitable to our farmers, and achieve our food food security and industrial needs. For sure, agricultural transformation of our counties over the past decade has been profound. We have witnessed tremendous advancements in technology, sustainability, farmer empowerment, and rural infrastructure development. However, we must recognize that these achievements are part of a complex, ongoing agricultural process. There are still gaps to be filled, policies to be aligned, like the one that we just talked about, and collaborations to be strengthened to ensure that our food system is resilient, equitable, and aligned with the diverse needs of our communities. Let me add that one of the statements that was made by His Excellency the President earlier at the time that he took over power is that the quickest way of transforming an economy is to invest in agriculture. And if we are cognizant of the fact that public pronouncements by leaders like the President are kind of directing policy-making organs to do the right thing, we, as actors in the agriculture sector, whether you are a policymaker or a lawmaker or a development partner, we need to come together and develop policies that are going to support the improvement of the productivity in our food systems and the process of value addition, so that we can be able to feed our people and have surplus for export, so that we can earn money to improve the economy. Thank you for your participation and dedication to this critical cause. Let's embark on this exciting journey together, embracing collaboration, open dialogue, and innovative thinking. Let's all support the implementation of the resolutions made here today. I believe that the rapporteur has done, and we can share this information so that all actors can be able to contribute to this. I pledge that as a member of the Agriculture Committee of the Council of Governors, I will do what is necessary to enforce or to put into practice some of the things and the thoughts that have come out in place today. Thank you very much, and God bless us all.
Thank you so much, sir. I think just two logistical announcements which Robert has tasked me with. One is dinner will be served right next to me, tent at 7:30 p.m. And can I request JJ to please come onto the stage for a photo shoot or photo for the panelists? Thank you.